Hello, fellow mortals, and welcome to Death, 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 the podcast about death, dying, and how it relates to us, the living. My name is Jordan Bulgis, and to my left is sitting
Jasmine Rayburn.
Jasmine Rayburn, and right across from me is producer extraordinaire
Roberto Eduardo Irvin.
Ah, there it is.
Here I is.
And we are here to talk about death, and
Again.
more specifically, assisted dying.
Yep, part
Yay.
2. Episode 3. Part 2 of our assisted dying mini-series,
Yep.
which I'm sure we'll expand upon in the future, but I think that this will be the last assisted dying related episode for a little while.
Yeah, take a little break. It's a heavy topic. We don't want to
We'll focus on some more, maybe light curiosities.
Yeah, something a little bit more
Freshen it
fun
up,
next
lighten it
time.
up.
Yeah, it's not just like emotionally heavy. It's like a lot of reading as well.
True that. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
research.
Jordan no read good.
Yeah.
Jordan no read fast.
Jordan no read fast. Jordan reads slow.
Yeah. And I only read what I want to, apparently, because.
Which is usually about dying. and
Yeah.
death.
Yeah. Well, I only read the facts I agreed with. So I got it totally wrong that.
Correction.
Yeah, this is a correction. Euthanasia is legal in Canada within the parameters of C14. So that's the distinction again between helping someone get a prescription to die versus actually being the one to administer the substance.
Yeah, the difference between you taking a pill yourself or whatever and a nurse or a doctor injecting you with something.
Yes, exactly. And
Or, as we learned in the last episode, putting a bag over your head.
Yeah, exactly. With a tube.
which
with a
is
tube.
which is definitely not a thing. I can say that
Anymore.
with confidence.
Anymore.
In Canada.
In Canada, yeah,
legally,
it's never. I don't think that
as
was
opposed
ever
to
a thing.
euthanasia, which is. And I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, well, why is that? And obviously, the obvious answer would be that, not everyone can swallow pills at that stage of their life. Not everyone can administer.
Not everyone has the mobility.
Yeah.
Or the faculties.
And a lot of people are in the hospital already. So it just kind of makes sense if you have access to an IV and the right kind of medication that, and there's a doctor there who's willing to do it, which I still think is like much less often that a doctor would be directly administering.
They do legally have to do a referral, though, right?
I was looking into that, and it's a little bit
think
more
they legally have
specific province to province.
Is that more province to province?
Yeah.
then?
Yeah.
Like, I know I did
Federally-
read that.
Federally, they don't have to. It's not required by law federally
No.
that they refer you to anybody. But there's provincial regulators, and by provincial regulators, I mean people giving doctors money, basically.
Yeah.
To
To do
get
this.
them to refer you. No,
In-
they pay the doctors that don't want to do it because they're not required to.
Yeah.
These provincial regulatory boards will give them money. Basically,
Oh, so they gave them like a financial incentive to kind
refer
of
them.
upset
Yeah.
to
their
refer to people that will do it.
okay, to upset their moral stance again. Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and you look at some of the language in C14 itself, and it's definitely funneled towards referring people.
Yeah.
But I know, based on some of the opposition I was reading about in Ontario, that they are required to refer.
That's I think what I'm
and-
specifically thinking
Yeah,
of.
and then there are certain like other types of situations where you'd be required to refer in other provinces.
Yeah.
But it varies quite a bit. So I definitely encourage you to look up the specifics in your own province to see what that is if you're interested in seeing
Or
who's-
territory.
or
True that.
territory to see how that works in your
Speaking
province.
of which I found interesting. So there's in the facts on assisted dying in dyingwithdignity.ca, at least I think it was this website, it had a breakdown of assisted deaths by province.
Oh yeah, that
Well,
would
it
be
wasn't that.
was in the CBC article about Rob Rollins.
Right,
And
who we need
I'm
to get
just bringing
into.
that up right now.
Yes.
Okay, so this is as of 2015. So obviously some of these numbers are going to be,
Different.
Larger or
Very
smaller.
different,
Well, not
yeah.
smaller.
but you can kind of get an idea.
It also says that those numbers aren't accurate because some of the clinics couldn't provide all of the records.
Yeah.
They didn't have all the records on hand.
And also there's
So the numbers are likely larger.
Yeah.
there's also like for like under the Yukon They don't have the numbers for the dates or the amount of people who've received assisted dying because the population is so small
Yeah.
that it raises confidentiality concerns.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now. It looks like most of these have been updated to 2017. Still a couple of years old, but a little more recent than I thought. So as of this article, it was a total of documented 1,324 people. Quebec at the top of the list with 469.
And we're talking about that have
had assisted
participated in
dying
assisted
since
dying.
it was
'Cause,
legal.
I don't think we've said that technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the numbers
are
for people that have.
legal cases.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's probably thousands and thousands of
Undocumented.
undocumented illegal cases.
Yeah.
Yes. And, or that just weren't quite within the parameters to be documented or whatever. Like, there's outliers for sure.
Do you want to say the numbers again? Sorry, I kind of.
Yeah, sorry. The total as of this, I mean, the dates are a little bit different, but Quebec is the highest at 469 people between December 10th, 2015 and December 9th, 2016. Ontario is second, 365 between June 17th and June 17th, 2016 and March 31st, 2017. And then BC is third, and then it just goes down from there. There's a big drop off of the prairie provinces. Obviously, population is a factor.
That all
Population
kind of adds up to
Access
population.
will be a
I
factor
think.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Probably also general morale. Like, people in prairie provinces are. I think there's going to be a larger population that is maybe a little more against it. Not to kind of
Not to
broadly
too much,
generalize,
I think
but
that
Well, you're looking at conservative provinces. It's
conservative
probably
and
more
also
likely.
religious bastions.
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Like outside of large.
just places with smaller urban centers.
Yeah.
Or like
outside of
fewer
large,
urban
outside
centers.
of the large cities, I think that the prairies, and I'm sure I'll be blasted on this, but I'm sure that the prairies are generally more religious.
Yeah, but also more conservative politically. And when
Yeah.
you're looking at the kind of the parties that have pushed medically assisted dying forward, it's generally been provinces that are NDP or
More
liberal.
progressive.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
get the larger
Or Quebec.
the larger
with,
cities that you have.
With the Bloc. The
Well-
Bloc Québécois, actually, as radical as they are, did a lot to push forward assisted dying in Quebec.
Well, there's another thing that pushed Quebec forward as well. And I don't know if you guys read about Stéphane Dufour and his
Yeah, a
uncle
little bit.
Chantal Motet. I don't know how to say that quite.
Yeah, we're going to mispronounce a lot of Québécois names and places, probably.
So basically, Stéphane Dufour was the first person to go on trial in Canada for helping someone commit suicide.
Yeah.
And it was worse than a suicide bag. So he helped him hang himself with
There's a dog collar and a rope.
yeah, like a, again, contraption that was just kind of pieced together. He was
makeshift MacGyver
Yeah.
Yeah.
suicide rig.
So was it, who was it that he was helping to assist suicide? Was it the family member?
his uncle Chantal.
And
yeah.
was he must have been in some way immobile.
Yes,
or
he.
deteriorating?
Let me look it up so I'm getting it right. Because that's in the timeline.
And also, when you say that he was the first Canadian, he was the first Canadian citizen who wasn't a doctor to be tried for this stuff.
Yes.
Because there were doctors that were prescribing medication that did do time,
Yeah.
like a year and a half or something.
He was just a dude.
He was a guy helping his uncle.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it a more landmark
Yeah.
case. Because there had been I think only one or two cases before where doctors had been convicted. And I can't remember their names right now, but it's in the timeline, which I'm sure
Yeah.
Jasmine's looking at right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'm trying to read fast,
One
but
of
it's
them,
so stressful.
one of them was.
I believe one was Dr. Zayas,
That sounds right.
Yeah.
and the other one was Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones, calling Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones, don't
Bang.
kill me.
Oh my goodness.
It's hard to find
Try and
jokes.
Stop me.
It's hard to find jokes.
We're doing our best. Doing our best over here.
Why can't I find this thing?
I'm pretty sure I had it pulled up.
There it is. December 2008. We're getting this from a CBC timeline of assisted suicide in Canada, which I definitely recommend reading. Anyway, December 2008, a Quebec jury acquits Stéphane Dufour on a single charge of assisted suicide. He had admitted to installing in a closet a rope, chain, and dog collar that his uncle Chantal Motet used to kill himself in September 2006. Dufour was the first Canadian ever to stand trial by jury for assisted suicide.
Okay.
So the other one would have been like a medical
Kind of
inquiry.
medical review
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because
Okay.
those two doctors, one of them lost their ability to practice medicine. The other one didn't. And
Yeah.
I didn't read into too much why there
So-
was a distinction between the two.
In 2007, one of the doctors, Dr. Ramesh Kumar Sharma, he was from Vernon, was given a conditional sentence of 2 years and had his physician's license revoked after prescribing a lethal dose of drugs for a 93-year-old patient. So that's one of
you're
them.
93. The other one, which is more controversial, was a Quebecois doctor.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And
Yeah.
he prescribed a lethal dose of sleeping pills to two men with AIDS who were depressed. It says depressed, but not terminally ill. But they had AIDS, so
In 98.
yeah. So that's pretty much terminally ill, right?
Well, if
But it's one of those things where the verbiage is
Yeah, but it's
Weird.
like when, right? They weren't on their deathbed. They weren't.
they were depressed, but it says they were depressed but not terminally ill.
And
It's
that
like,
was
you're depressed
Maurice.
because you have AIDS, because that makes you terminally ill.
yeah,
basically.
yeah, and
Maurice Genereux. Can you guys help me with the French stuff?
Genereux.
Yeah,
Genereux.
I can't do
I
it.
believe it's Genereux. I did actually look up the pronunciation of
Yeah,
that name.
my
right,
prairie
no
way
joke.
is it's like a reverse accent. It's like
Genereux.
just a complete flat lack of accent.
I don't know. It's like Morris Generox.
Yeah, Genereux.
Generox.
Anyway, that was the doctor in 98 with the sleeping pills.
Well, and
Yeah.
that with like the, they weren't like that's why they have the foreseeable.
Which
Was
is,
it foreseeable?
which is still problematic
Imminent
language.
foreseeable death in
That's-
like the Bill C or 14.
C14 has, and I think that's probably one of the biggest failing points of that bill in my mind, because,
It's broad.
well, define your death being foreseeably or reasonably foreseeable.
Yeah.
Everyone's death is
Reasonably foreseeable.
Yeah.
That's, you're a human. There you go. Your death is reasonably foreseeable.
Yeah.
And if you go
It
on,
makes no sense to have that in a bill, a law around assisted dying. 'Cause
Well,
it's way too loose.
Yeah. The problem is the argument of reasonably. Then, right? Like, what do you
Yeah.
consider reasonable?
Well, a lot of clinicians would infer that as terminally ill.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that means you have to be, in a lot of physicians' eyes, and again, it's different for every physician that reads the bill, basically. You have to be terminally ill.
but have some sort of timeline, right?
But
2
But
months. 2
within
weeks,
the bill, they
whatever.
specifically say that you don't have to be terminally ill, right? And
Yeah.
then but doctors
But
are
then they put
taking
in
that.
but then they put in that stupid verbiage of reasonably foreseeable
Yeah, and they're
death.
taking that to twist it into.
Yeah.
When really, I think that just means like you're looking towards the future, and they're like it's not looking good. It's reasonably foreseeable, and
I think a better use of the term would be immediately foreseeable.
yeah, but then that. I don't know, because I would say I think they put reasonably foreseeable in there to have that gray area where you can have the
Yeah.
conversations about people that
People
are
that-
looking maybe a decade down the line at that they're
Yeah.
not gonna be able to
People-
function the way they want
People
to.
that maybe aren't terminally ill but have degenerative diseases
Yeah.
where they're
a declining condition.
they're
right?
declining, where their faculties will be removed from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which-
So I think they're trying to put like that's in there to protect that, but then it's been being flipped as well and kind of used as as the opposite.
Yeah.
I think as time goes on, though, we'll kind of see what the need is a little bit more, and things will kind of adapt. If
Yeah.
you go to dyingwithdignity.ca, they're very much advocates for advanced requests. So we
Yeah.
talked about that last episode about people who have deteriorative diseases where they might not be able to give that second consent. So they're very much advocates for broadening the law and broadening the access. So that's a disclaimer in there. They do have a link to the full text of Bill C-14 through the website, but they also have a really great summary as well. So definitely recommend giving that a read, where they just kind of break it down into just easier language, that's a little less technical. And that's where I found out that I was wrong about euthanasia,
What do you
Yeah.
think?
because it says what types of MAID are medically assisted assistance in dying permitted in Canada. And it's physician or nurse practitioner can directly administer a substance that causes the death of the person who's requested it. And 2, a physician or nurse practitioner can give or prescribe to a patient a substance that they can self-administer to cause their own death. So who is eligible? I think we should probably talk about that just like a little bit, because we've been kind of dancing around it. So here's the
Yeah, well, it's like, I don't know if we're necessarily dancing around it, but we're
talked about it.
We're confused by it because it has confusing prerequisites.
Yeah. And this
So
is
it's hard to explain and pin down.
This is what it says. This is like the numbered list. So you have to have, like we said in episode, government-funded health insurance in Canada.
So no, and that means no death tourism.
No
suicide
death tourism.
tourism.
Yeah. You must be 18 years of age or older. 3, you must have a grievous and irredeemable condition as defined by section 241.2, paragraph 2 of the Criminal Code. It's still just as vague when you read it.
Yeah, that's very vague.
It just says grievous and irredeemable condition. So that's really broad. 4, have made a voluntary request that was not made as a result of external pressure. There's a lot of safeguards in place to make sure that people aren't pressuring
Somebody with,
patients to kill themselves or
because they
pressuring,
have an insurance plan on them or something like that. If it's a family member or whatever, yeah.
or like say a doctor just was, could be biased and not meaning to, but being suggesting assisted death too much, and putting kind of that idea. So it pretty much has to be brought up by the person, or that's the idea anyway. It should be brought up by the person.
Absolutely.
And 5, give informed consent to receive medical assistance in dying after being informed of the means that are available to relieve their suffering, including palliative care. So you have to go through every other option first.
There's also stipulations for the definition of grievous and irredeemable medical conditions, which are that the patient must have serious and incurable, a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability. They are in an advanced state or of irreversible decline in capability. That illness or disease or that state of decline causes them enduring physical or psychological suffering that is intolerable to them and that cannot be relieved under the conditions that they consider acceptable. And finally, that their natural death has become, again, reasonably foreseeable, taking into account all of the medical circumstances without a prognosis necessarily having been made. So that means that there doesn't have to be necessarily a timeline.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a 6 months or a 2 months. It
Okay.
just means that it has to be reasonably foreseeable.
Still so vague.
Reasonably, guys. It's
So,
got to
like,
be
even-
reasonable.
It's baked into the hardest forms of the law, which is what makes it so problematic.
Yeah.
Is that to meet all 4 of these criteria is really hard, really, really hard. A lot of people people with dementia, and, but again, obviously, we're working towards broadening the law. But people with dementia almost have zero chance of meeting all 4 of these criteria unless they have a cancer or another, or like a ALS or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like they'll be lucky to meet 1 or 2 of those criteria, let alone all 4, which they need all 4.
In time.
Yeah.
Yeah, in time. We were kind of briefly talking about how the law is really structured in a lot of ways to protect people involved.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit more focused on
By
that.
people involved, you mean the people that are prescribing the drugs or administering the drugs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the professionals
The
involved.
professionals.
The law is tailored definitely to them to avoid incrimination.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
basically completely remove them from any kind of repercussion.
Right. So these people are pharmacists, social workers, psychologists, therapists.
And bus
Nurses and
drivers,
doctors.
surprisingly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
Lawyers.
expect bus drivers.
Lawyers, I
but-
didn't think about
Nurses.
lawyers.
Hospital lawyers, so people who, so they can't like sue the hospital after
Yeah.
the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as long of a bill as I thought it would be reading it all the way through. I think it's only like 8 pages.
Yeah.
And it's English and French on each, so it's realistically it's more like 4 pages. And I think a good 50% of that is just clearing the names of the doctors and the lawyers and the nurses
Yeah.
and the pharmacists.
Which it's an important thing,
Absolutely.
not just to protect them, but I think also to make them comfortable in as comfortable as possible in doing something like that, right? And
Yeah.
participating in that. You know, if they know that they're covered in that regard, then they're obviously going to be more willing to,
Yeah, to give referrals or to
yeah,
give the prescription or the procedure themselves.
yeah, exactly.
I agree.
Something interesting.
Finally.
I know, right? Yawn.
Yeah, this is a real snooze fest, you know.
Just kidding.
Is that in order to have your application approved, you need 2 independent witnesses, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
need people that can't stand to gain from your death in any way or don't have a direct relationship with you.
That's where the bus drivers come in.
That's where
Right.
the bus drivers come in. But like a lot of people towards the end of their life, they don't have those kinds of relationships anymore. You know, it gets smaller
Yeah.
and smaller. And sometimes the people that are like, it can't be a caregiver of any kind.
So if you're in a home or something like that and
Yeah.
you're up there in age and a lot of people in your life passed away,
You have to
I mean, the
you have to
reality is a
find
lot
some
of
off the
people-
side of the street or something.
yeah, like a lot of people in that situation end up pretty alone and isolated,
Well,
right?
you can actually find, and they train volunteers now
Yeah.
to be
really?
witnesses for this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it says here that as of July 2018, Dying with Dignity Canada, which is the website we're on, their witnesses served as witnesses in a total of 700 cases.
Wow.
So that's part of what their advocacy is about, is creating that access for people that might not otherwise have it, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't meet the
You
requirement.
say 700 cases, and there's only, 1,300 documented right now? So that's over half the cases.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a couple years added, right? Because this is July 2018, and
So that's another extra year
think
on
the
top.
longest
of,
one- yeah, the
It's
long-
still a huge amount
yeah, yeah,
of the overall statistic.
people who might not otherwise have access to this kind of the benefits of this law, that we're able to because of this volunteer program, which is
That's
pretty
great.
pretty cool.
I didn't know that at all. But
Yeah.
that's
So
really
if you
great.
guys are looking for some volunteer work,
Yeah.
something to consider.
I'm going to go witness a death?
Oh, man.
Be really
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, let's do it. So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's sweet.
No, that is a fantastic thing out there, and I think that shows that people are thinking about these things and coming at it from these different angles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of different angles, do we want to talk about some of the opposition to assisted
Yeah,
dying?
Heck yeah, we do.
That's one thing I didn't really research.
Well, this is going to be a fun adventure for you.
Yeah.
It's the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. This video is, it's called Please Oppose Assisted Suicide, and it's done by Rhonda Weave, and she's the co-chair of CCD's Ending of Life Ethics Committee. And it basically presents the arguments against assisted suicide from the perspective of people with disabilities, and why that's a conflict that exists. So something definitely.
Yeah, it's coming from the angle that people that are able-bodied, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
might have might perceive losing certain functions as like, oh, my quality of life is now deteriorated past a point, which implies that these people that are living with these disabilities have a lower quality of life, I think, and don't.
Well, it's not even just that they have a lower quality of life. She says something in the video that really kind of sent it home for me, and it's better dead than disabled.
Yeah,
And
which I
how-
think is a mentality that a lot of people have. I know,
Unfortunately,
I know that's
yes.
something that, like, when I was younger, I remember having a very strong fear of becoming quadriplegic, and like that, and how your life would change. And I think that is, when you're lucky enough to have, to be able-bodied in that aspect, you can kind of have that viewpoint that it is like, oh, well, that's the worst thing that could happen. That's the end of the world. When there are people that are living full,
Yeah.
wonderful lives.
And that devalues their
What a wonderful
experience.
life.
And it also kind of blurs the area, right? About who has access to assisted dying.
Mm-hmm.
And, and back to kind of consent and informed consent.
Yeah.
And making sure that people are protected. Okay, so I think you should probably watch it anyway. It's just a short video if you haven't seen any of this stuff.
What's this?
This is Please Oppose. This is a suicide through Council of Canadians with Disabilities. And this is Rhonda Weeb, the co-chair of CCD's Ending of Life Ethics Committee.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. At this point in the show, we watched a video on Jasmine's laptop, and it turns out that's not great content for a podcast. The video that we watched was from the Council of Canadians with Disabilities and how they are anti-assisted dying in Canada. Although we value Rhonda Weeb's opinions, we don't agree with all of them, but we'd love to hear what you think, so we're going to link the Council of Canadians with Disabilities website on our YouTube page. So if you want to head over there, watch their video, maybe give us a like and subscribe, I don't know, while you're there. We would appreciate to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Back to the show.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Better dead than disabled.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? So it's not what we usually think of when we think of opposition,
No.
but it's an important thing to talk about.
There are some, there are some things that I rub up against in that, specifically when she uses the verb killed or like to kill,
Yeah.
which is, okay, that's loaded.
I take issue with the fact that she thinks that this bill somehow threatens her and other disabled people.
But you could see why it might feel that way, right? You know, she says right at the beginning, you know, kind of like, okay, so these people want to die because their dignity's been taken away from them.
Yeah.
You know, but what about people who've been living their whole lives like this? What does that mean for their value?
Yeah, and
their
obviously
experience of life.
And she's obviously somebody that is a huge advocate for the rights of people with disabilities and the way that we view that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I could see how this would be a threat to that work that she's put in of like, no, we live full lives, you know, we have experiences like everybody else. It's just it's a different kind of experience. And this, I could see how you would be like, all right, well, this is putting in the idea that your quality of life is less, and this is going against everything that I've been working towards for however
just your
long
quality
she's
of
been
life,
doing
but your
this.
value.
Exactly. Yeah, your value as a human being
Yeah.
and the value of your life.
I think language is obviously very important here, you know, just like you mentioned, using the word killing.
Yeah.
You know, but
There's so
how
much
we
power
talk
in
about
language.
assisted dying needs to be cognizant of that. What we define as dignity, what we define as suffering, and how we define the value of life with a disability. You know, I would argue that there's a major distinction in that most people who will require access to assisted dying are people with issues that are causing them ongoing pain that is to them unmanageable.
The other argument she's making is that this organization exists to help people that maybe were in an accident or something like that, kind of,
Yeah.
To help them through this process and show them that they can live full and meaningful lives. And then this bill comes along that is basically giving like another option.
Yeah.
And her priority is to show that that you can live this full of a life. And I think she's
Like there's more to life than just going to the bathroom on your own.
Yeah, and I think that her worry is that this comes along and people are instantly jumping to that conclusion, which is why there are those.
I don't think it's the case.
No, I think that's why those safeguards and things exist there.
Yeah.
I think the worry is just that that's going to kind of circumventicate. You know what I'm
Circumventicate?
circumventicate, exactly. You guys know the words that I'm saying.
Circumnavigate. Yeah.
I like
Circumvent.
Yeah.
I totally forgot my point now. But just going around the work that she's done so people kind of skip that and go straight to, oh, well, my quality of life.
When she's talking about culture, right? So if it's suddenly okay to die because you're disabled.
Yeah.
What is that, how does that affect supports for the disabled?
Yeah, exactly.
If there is this mentality that's just like, oh, you're suffering, why don't you just die, kind of, and I don't necessarily agree that that's what's happening, but I can definitely see where that anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
You know, after dealing with a whole life of discrimination against.
But there's a difference between being disabled and being terminally ill or having your death be reasonably foreseeable.
Yes.
So again, it doesn't apply to the majority of disabled people.
No. But there is going to be eventually, and for Death with Dignity and other advocates of advance requests and things like that, there's going to be more room for people with disabilities
Yeah, with
to make the decision to die.
Yeah.
And so it is important that we're talking about how that comes about, because we obviously want to make sure that people aren't in a position where they're being pressured to die because they're disabled. Right?
Yeah.
And right now it's not as accessible because we've got that kind of vague definition of foreseeable death. But as that broadens, that conversation is going to become more and more relevant to be making sure that everyone's having fair access.
You think So do you think if you went and saw a psychic and the psychic was like, you're going to die in 3 years,
Your death is now
and it's going to
reasonably
suck,
foreseeable. Yeah.
man, it's going to be the worst. You could go to like a doctor and be like, listen, I talked to this lady with a crystal ball.
Madame Ludwig told me
Yeah.
my death is reasonably
Well,
foreseeable.
was Madame Cleo? You remember Madame
Madame
Cleo?
Cleo?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to do the accent. I almost
Yeah,
did.
I know. Me too. I was right there.
I was right there. Yeah, I went and saw Madame Cleo, and she's like, I want to do it so bad. I'm not going to. You're going to die.
I'm just waiting
You're going
for
to
it.
die real soon. And then you went to the doctor, and you're like, listen, I think you could get a doctor to be like, certain ones being like a little bit out there, you know?
Yeah, you gotta be.
Is that a reasonable, foreseeable?
I don't think so.
No. I mean, there's part of me that's like, oh, if somebody's suffering, they should be able to die. But obviously, it's not that simple, and nor should it be that simple. I don't agree, for the record, with everything that she said, but I definitely understand where that feeling comes from.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
her sentiment, but it's also important to note that it's still illegal in Canada to recommend or persuade someone to commit suicide.
Yeah.
So none of these doctors, when people come to a doctor with a terminal illness, expecting like strategies, situations, treatments, doctors aren't legally allowed to tell them like, hey, you know, it's gonna suck, and we can mitigate the pain, but you're gonna die in X years or X months. Mm-hmm. Would you like no doctor practicing right now legally is allowed to say, but we could just do a medically assisted death. No one's allowed to do that. So if a disabled person all of a sudden comes into a doctor's office and feels like they're going to be pressured to commit medically assisted death, medically assisted suicide, it's not going to happen. I'm sure that there's isolated cases where doctors are trying to help their patients by recommending medically assisted death, but
Yeah,
it's not
I mean,
the norm, and it's definitely not legal.
no.
I don't
So-
think her concern is so much based on just like, you know, like the extreme of disabled people just getting
Like shepherded
killed by
away
their.
I think it's the culture of it, a lot of it, I
It's
think,
really
and
just
how
the
it represents.
conversation about it, because
Yeah.
it's like it's just been so uphill for people with disabilities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, I spent a lot of time kind of in that world growing up. My mom's is still a huge advocate for people with disabilities. She was instrumental in getting a facility shut down in Moose Jaw, Valley View. Have you ever heard of Valley View?
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was a big deal. She witnessed a lot of abuses there, and you know, so and she's done a lot of like staff training and stuff, and social work for people with disabilities. And so I'm fortunate in that some of the issues that people with disabilities deal with have been talked about in my life. Mm-hmm. But also, there's the other side of it where everyone I knew in my school age or anything who had a kind of a noticeable or severe disability, they were kind of put into another classroom or they were put somewhere else. And you don't really see.
There's a lot of that growing up. Like, I remember that as well.
Yeah, just, you don't see
To a certain degree.
how much people have had
Yeah.
to fight for basic access and space and conversations in the world. And it's just starting to get to a place.
Well, even like with the straw ban and stuff like that, like that's going on now. And I've heard a big argument against that is that a lot of people with disabilities need
Yeah,
straws.
definitely.
They need that. And so to really like to not offer that in any way, like the plastic straw specifically, because, you know, the paper ones, I don't use straws. I don't need straws.
Yeah.
But some people do. And so for an establishment not to have that option there, isn't like there should be like you don't give them out for every drink or whatever, but you
Yeah.
have that option there
You're
for
just
somebody with a
making it less
disability that
accessible.
might require it.
Well, yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but perhaps my more pragmatic mind says, like, if a disabled person needs a wheelchair, they don't expect the restaurant to supply a
To
wheelchair.
supply a wheelchair.
No, but they expect the restaurant to supply a ramp.
Yeah.
You know,
And a
and
knife and
the
fork.
means to use the facilities, and so it's really in that category, right? You know, because it's
really-
like if you
really
can't,
splitting hairs, though.
I
I think.
I mean, hopefully we get to a place where everyone's using reusable straws and that they're carrying them with them.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's where it is. But it's
the other
just,
argument to that is that the straws are not the thing that's completely destroying our planet.
it's
No,
just a
It's
bandage.
the 100 corporations that are responsible for 70%
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
and
climate
who's
change.
getting-
tiny piece of hay on top of this.
and it's
that
people with
stack.
disabilities that are getting punished for this like little show of this symbolic show of environmentalism.
Are they being punished?
Well, they're the ones that are affected by it in a
they're
real way.
At worst, they're being inadvertently excluded. I don't think they're being punished. I think it's an involuntary thing.
Yeah, they're getting.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's like
affecting
deliberate.
them more
Yeah.
than it is.
It's
anybody
certainly
else.
Yeah.
affecting them more than
Yeah.
it affects me in
Sure.
any way. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't like paper straws. They're icky. Like that's my my only like, you know.
Yeah, they
That's your hot take
disintegrate.
on the
I've
issue?
heard that's the
Yeah.
complaint I've heard
They
a bunch.
dissolve
They
and-
dissolve and well, then
Yeah,
drink,
my
drink from the cup like it's a
Frappuccino.
cup.
Have you guys heard of pasta straws?
Sounds gross.
So they make straws out of, they extrude pasta and they make straws out of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they're super thin and they get mushy after like 15 minutes.
Why? Why do
Yeah.
that then?
It's the
Ew.
same with paper straws, though.
I
To a
guess
certain
Like I
extent.
said, people should just be carrying
they're
their
just
own
like
straws
they're-
with them. If they're a straw person,
they have metal
eventually,
straws. Everybody has a water bottle
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. I guess the idea is that they're just far more biodegradable and environmentally
Than-
friendly
than a paper.
than even processed paper.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well,
Even
paper
if it's
takes a
like
lot of water to
70%,
make as well.
Post-consumer paper to make these recycled
Yeah.
paper straws. There's still like glues and
Yeah.
dyes and
Yeah, for sure.
Shit like that,
That's a
so-
good point.
Yeah, I'm definitely
pasta straws.
pro assisted dying, but
Oh.
I do think it's important to include that in the conversation because it might not occur to us. You know,
Should we? I have a list here of a lot of the Hippocratic Oath and International Code of Medical Ethics and things like that that are coming from the medical
how-
side and
and
more.
how that pertains to the new laws that are
well,
being
this
built?
is this is more international. But I'm like since we're kind of going for the argument against, like these are kind of some of like from the medical perspective.
yeah,
So there's the Hippocratic Oath, which everyone is familiar with.
we assume.
You would
If
assume,
you don't
right?
know about it, look it up.
Yeah, it's the idea that doctors can't do harm to their patients.
Yeah, everything is
In
to
any
keep the
situation,
patient alive. So like the argument here is that physician assisted suicide is contrary to the Hippocratic Oath, which is the oath historically taken by physicians. It states, "I will give no deadly medicine to anyone if asked, nor suggest any such counsel," which obviously goes directly against C14 and what we've been
Yeah,
talking
absolutely.
about.
Totally.
And then, but the original oath, however, has been modified many times and, contrary to popular belief, is not required by most modern medical schools. So it's actually not like a requirement.
Yeah, it's more of a tradition.
And there are other procedures forbidden by the Hippocratic Oath, which are common today, like abortions,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is a topic that is,
it's a whole other can of worms.
yeah, there's no controversy about abortion. Everyone's on board, right?
Everyone's totally on board with abortion.
Maybe not in this room. Yeah.
yeah. All right, so this is one that I hadn't heard of. I mean, everyone's aware of the Geneva Convention as well.
Yeah.
And so, but the Declaration of Geneva is a revision of the Hippocratic Oath, first drafted in 1948 by the World Medical Association in response to forced euthanasia, eugenics, and other medical crimes performed in Nazi Germany. So this comes straight from World War II, which is
Zyklon B and the gassing of the Jews.
yeah,
and,
exactly.
Race cleansing.
yeah, but
eugenics.
also
Well, the medical
eugenics.
experiments and things like
and-
that, and like there was a lot of this in Japan as well. With
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was, something 7, the facility of 7 or something like that. There's another like they did a bunch of medical experiments on POWs and things as well. But anyway, so and in this declaration, it contains, "I will maintain the utmost respect for human life."
Yeah.
So that's their argument. That's a little more broad than the Hippocratic Oath, right? But I thought that was interesting because that's an argument that
Yeah.
pertains to this, but comes directly out of historical context in something that like the Holocaust, something that was terrible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Holocaust was-
you guys,
Let's
you
not,
agree?
It was
are we
terrible.
not, let's not forget
So-
about Stalin here.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
There's
it's
also
true.
Stalin's
Shout
gulags,
out.
and
yep.
he killed far more people than Hitler did.
It's,
But
it's not a competition.
It's not a competition, but it came out of a time when multiple countries were committing great atrocities.
Yeah.
Like not just Germany, it
Absolutely.
was Russia, it was Japan.
Which again does not happen now. There's
Never.
no countries killing
Never.
journalists and sawing them
No.
into bits with a bone saw
Nope. Not getting hanged
at an embassy.
Yeah,
That
in
didn't
front of
happen
hundreds of people.
recently.
Nope.
All right, we can
Anyway.
take one of these heavy things on at a time. I'm a fragile human.
You don't want me to just fire them off? I
Yeah.
got more.
No, your thing. Yes, definitely.
Oh, okay. My
just
thing.
not
You're just
the-
not abortions or the killing of
Genocide.
journalists or
Yeah.
genocide. You don't want to
Yeah.
cover that.
Yeah, no.
Just gotta
I feel like
narrow
we got
it.
enough on our plate already
Yeah.
right now
Feel a
with
little
this one
tight
thing that's
in my
huge.
chest.
Future
a little bit.
episode, perhaps we'll talk about the Holocaust.
Oh God.
Yeah, you got.
I wouldn't mind.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's definitely
talk-
within the realm, but that's
How
going
about
to
this?
be.
We'll talk about talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
For now, it's not on our roadmap.
Let's build
No.
our way there,
Yeah.
maybe.
I think it's a huge topic, though, so whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the one. So this is the one that I maybe should have read first. This is more pertains more to the video we just watched about people with disabilities. But this is kind of what we were talking about. In I guess their words, this is the opposition because of expansion to people with chronic disorders and disabilities. And this is from I think this is the statement of Marbella. A concern present among healthcare professionals who are opposed to PAS are the detrimental effects of the procedure can have with regard to vulnerable populations. So this is people with disabilities and things like that. This is known as the slippery slope argument and encompasses the apprehension that once PAS is initiated for the terminally ill, it will progress to other vulnerable communities, namely the disabled, and may begin to be used by those who feel less worthy based on their demographic or socioeconomic status. In addition to vulnerable populations are more at risk of untimely deaths because patients might be subjected to PAS without their genuine consent.
Yeah.
So that's why we have those, those safeguards and things like that in place, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think the argument here is kind of like something we didn't talk about, I guess, is the slippery slope into like a backslide into eugenics, almost taking
where
something
we're killing people with disabilities because we assume their life is just inherently
exactly,
less
or
valuable.
it can get twisted into that. Well, they're not a full person, right?
Yeah.
And that narrative can be changed. So you end up with something like the Holocaust or something like that.
The
again.
slippery slope argument is not 100% valid, though. It's a little bit of a fallacy. Like,
Yeah, of course.
It takes a lot of people behind it to the point where it's not a slippery slope anymore. It's people pushing it in that direction.
But you
And I
gotta
don't-
acknowledge the extreme, right? Like,
Yeah, sure.
and
but
put
I don't-
safeguards. You have to be aware of it to
in-
put safeguards in
In
place for
Canada,
that.
I don't see it, but maybe in the States,
Yeah.
maybe in other countries where more radicalized governments are more common. But I just don't see it in Canada.
but it doesn't even have to be like on a wide level. Even
No.
if one person with a disability dies
Yeah.
without proper consent because of that mentality or because there's room for that, like that's enough, so
Yeah.
to be having that conversation in the first place,
Yeah.
because it completely delegitimizes it for everyone else to be requiring it as well.
Yeah.
And so you have to be kind of err on the side of caution. Talk about it, at least be considering it.
Yeah, and you brought up like the states specifically and that being possible in the states, and the American Medical Association's Code of Ethics states that physician-assisted suicide is prohibited.
Right.
So they're completely against it because it is fundamentally incompatible with the physician's role as a healer, and because it would be difficult or impossible to control and would pose serious societal risks. So again, this is that slippery slope argument
Also,
that they
it's
have.
impossible to continue to make money off of people once
that
they've
are
already died.
sick. Yeah, that's true.
That's probably a huge part of it.
To tell, like,
And
sound
that's-
really
and that's-
paranoid and cynical.
And to
but-
No,
me,
I think you're 100% right.
yeah.
and to me, that is like, and that's the same argument as like a lot of the pro-life argument as well. In that, like, well, we're aborting fetuses now. What about like when somebody wants to kill their 1-year-old kid? That's okay. It's a
Yeah.
slippery slope. And you're like, no, that's a different thing. That's a
whole
totally
different-
different
That's
argument.
homicide.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, there's definitely
infanticide.
nuance to that. But yeah, I mean, I still think it's important to talk about and acknowledge for sure. I mean, I could go on and on about how against I am like pickling people beyond any quality of life, so
Yeah.
that they continue to be charged
Yeah.
for their
Yeah, so they
existence. You
Yeah,
know,
they're there for
Keep money.
for vanity purposes only.
well, yeah,
Pretty much.
There's a business behind it, and I think that that's the thing. You know, there's going to be people who are opposed to assisted dying just because of how much money is made in those 20 years that people are bedridden
Yeah.
yeah.
between 80 and 100 or whatever. You know,
I mean, we being in BC and Victoria especially, we see it every day. We live in probably, I don't want to say this because I haven't fact checked myself, but like one of the retirement capitals of Canada.
I would assume
oh
with
yeah,
the weather and
yeah,
Yeah, just the
because
climate
it's
and-
warmer and there's no ice.
We have a lot of facilities out here, so it's something we see every day, and it is a huge industry.
Yeah,
But
well, and there's
It's not
there's money out
necessarily
here.
it's not necessarily always humane.
No, that's my nightmare is not being able to do anything and just not be able to even stare out the window and recognize that there's sunlight, you know?
Yeah.
Because I've cared for people who don't exist anymore, you know? And I'm not just talking about changing people or feeding people. I'm talking about like they shriek all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they can't communicate at all. They can't express their needs at all. They just shake, and that's, you know, that, and they'll live to be 102 or something, you know, and like that's no way to live. Who knows? But you know, I think that's a human right. If you want to do that, if you're like, yeah, keep me alive as long as possible, I think that's your right. But I just don't think that should be the default necessarily.
Well, you should have the choice,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jordan, if you want to finish going through that, and then I think we should talk about the Rob Rollins
Yeah, I
article.
I
'cause
basically
we're coming up on an hour.
Sure. I mean, I have a little bit more here. We could get into the Catholic Church or like Judaism, but basically, Catholicism is what you would expect. It's against it.
Yeah.
You know, God is the creator and author of all life, and
Commit
therefore
suicide,
He's
you're
the
gonna
one
go
that
to
kind
hell.
of decides it.
Yeah.
Judaism is a little bit less against it. I think there are groups that are, but there are apparently instances of suicide and assisted suicide appearing in the Bible and rabbinic literature. So there's a debate going on within there about that. I think I'll just end on this isn't because this is all kind of the opposed. The last one is neutrality, and there have been calls for organizations representing medical professionals to take a neutral stance on assisted dying
Yeah.
rather than a position of opposition. And the reasoning is that this would better reflect the views of medical professionals and that of a wider society and prevent those bodies from exerting undue influence over the debate. So it's kind of the idea of, you know, almost we're too close to this. We have to take a step back, and
Yeah.
the broader society has to be the people to make this decision and
Yeah.
kind of come to this.
I think that the Jewish church is really good about recognizing that they're not necessarily part of the zeitgeist of the global culture anymore, but also not like trying to push back against it and
Well, I think that's
scream that we're all gonna go to hell and die. Like they're very
Well,
aware
Jews
of.
don't believe in hell, so
yeah, that's true. That's a fundamental.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
we're
think
not
that's a
gonna-
fundamental difference between Judaism and a lot of religions, especially
hellfire?
those like Christian. Well, that like, yeah, like they don't go out and try and convert people. Like, there's no call for that within Judaism.
No,
like
it's
it's kind of the
actually-
So they don't
opposite.
care if they
Actually
lose some
really,
numbers?
really hard.
Yeah,
It's really hard to become
Sorry.
Jewish if you're not Jewish.
exactly. So there's
Even if
no
you marry into a Jewish family, you have to you basically have to go to school
yeah, you do.
and get accepted by a council of rabbis.
Yeah, and so
really hard.
It's not. So I think they just have more of a like we do our thing, you do your thing, like
Yeah.
a kind of live and let live type of
Live and let
belief. Live and let die. Live
Great-
and let die.
great movie. Oh,
I do want to mention one more thing within
No.
Canada, and it's Canadians for Conscience.ca.
Yeah.
So they're an opposition group as well. So basically, their deal is religious hospitals, Catholic
Yeah.
hospitals, specifically in Ontario, where you are required to make referrals.
Yeah.
And their right to refuse to participate even in a referral as a religious institution. Because doctors can't really it's an ethical issue to fail to provide a service that's legal.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily saying, no to legalized physician-assisted suicide. They're more just saying there needs to be a clause there to advocate for doctors and nurses and, facility members to be able to refuse referrals if they're within a religious institution. A religious hospital.
I mean,
it says here, it brings up here, which is an important point, that it actually does violate their constitutional rights.
Yes, the freedom of
force
religion.
them to refer something that goes against their
religious
conscious ethics.
Yeah. So I think that's something to consider as well. And I kind of am with them a little bit, but there's also part of me that's like, fuck, I don't know how I feel about.
From just like that, like surface level. Yeah. It kind of seems to me like, I'm like, yeah, that's understandable. You're right to religious freedoms.
Yeah.
And within the context of this building that is a religious hospital.
But like, how many Catholic hospitals exist? It's not like everyone who goes to a Catholic hospital is Catholic,
right?
It's like,
not everyone that
do we
works
have like
in a
a
Catholic hospital is a Catholic,
or just like a JW hospital where you can refuse blood transfusions? Like, there's something to me that feels like a little messed up about being able to refuse a legal service.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can see why they feel that way. Obviously, don't agree with it, but I feel like there could be a little more protection written for these people.
I think it comes down to we just need better tools. We need better resources.
Yeah, like a bag. Come on.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
About getting referrals.
Yeah.
Like there has to be somewhere on the internet or elsewhere a directory of doctors all over Canada that will.
Yeah.
That will supply you with medically assisted death. And if your doctor is Catholic and you go to him and you request this and he says no, I mean, find another doctor. I know that's hard to say for a lot of people, but if you're at a point in your life where you're pursuing medically assisted dying, I think you have a certain amount of conviction.
Yeah,
you will find a doctor. So I don't think if someone wants to say no, I'm not going to prescribe you this. That's fine.
But that's easy for us to say here in a city center. Access is a real issue for people in small towns. Man, I was like, it's like an hour and a half away from the nearest hospital that was reliably staffed. So that's an issue for people who have mobility issues who are requiring that, and the only hospital near them is a church run or a church operated. And that comes back to
we need better tools and resources.
Yeah, and if something happens, like if you are in a situation where you're taken to a hospital in an ambulance, they take you to the closest hospital, the one that they can get you to the quickest. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a situation like that where that is the case, and then you remain there, you're kind of stuck there because of whatever happened, and that this is a service you want to pursue, but you're stuck in this place that maybe wouldn't have been your choice. You're not a religious person, but it just happens to be the closest.
Yeah. Well, in a hospital
location.
Instead of when it could have been your home or something like that. I did read something about like booths that go through rural areas in like Switzerland and stuff like that, so the people who can't necessarily leave their homes have access.
Oh, really?
Suicide booths?
Like traveling. No. Well,
like Futurama?
Yeah.
Like
in my research
people.
on Wikipedia, I had a link that I'm pretty sure was fictional suicide booths from Futurama.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, all right, Wikipedia, you're thorough.
It says on Canadians for Conscience, in Ontario, Nova Scotia, doctors are forced by their regulatory college to refer against their deeply held moral convictions. And in some provinces, there is pressure on faith-based institutions to allow MAID on the premises. So apparently they got protections for people in Manitoba, and they're trying to get a similar bill passed in Saskatchewan as well for those protections. So
protections against people that...
Protections for people who are being pressured to...
that want to refuse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's called Bill C-418.
Is should there be an argument to... I don't know, I'm thinking about it more.
It's Canada.
Absolutely.
There'll be an argument on everything forever.
Yeah, that's true. I just mean like of course, if somebody's religious and like ethically against it, you can't force them to perform this. But like, I don't know, forcing somebody to be like, all right, well, you can go see this guy,
or give them a website,
is not like, it's not putting that on their shoulders. It's just a referral pointing them to someone else. It's not
But for someone who believes,
and they're not making any kind of decision. They're just literally being like, no, over there.
I think for someone that has this strong of a moral conviction, pointing them in a direction of someone that will give them a medically assisted death is as bad as
yeah,
Sure.
giving it themselves.
But get over yourself.
I know.
It's not about you.
I don't agree with it, but
I respect them.
Yeah.
I respect
I'm trying-
I
yeah.
respect anybody that will stand up in the face of
yeah,
a newly passed bill,
And,
basically.
yeah.
Anything slightly anti-disestablishment. I'm all on board.
For sure. And I'm like,
But-
and that was my initial reaction. But the more I'm thinking about it, it just does still kind of seem like I'm putting my belief on this person,
Yeah.
which is not. I don't care what you believe. You don't get to do that to somebody else. And if you
Yeah.
are,
especially
and
if it's legal, you
and-
know.
yeah,
it's
and if
legal.
you were somebody that wanted to take up the responsibility of being a physician, tough shit. That's the situation you chose.
Yeah, go practice medicine in
Yeah.
a country that doesn't allow
Yeah,
medically assisted
yeah,
death.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to feel bad for you, doctor.
I disagree with him, but I get it. I get it. I can put myself in there and see how that would feel as someone who believes that
Mm-hmm.
assisted dying is murder, you know. But
I just-
it
But they're not doing it. That's what I don't
rubs
know.
me the wrong way.
I'm
yeah.
What
just-
I would say is if you're denied medically assisted death by your doctor, the responsibility should fall to the hospital or just our government
I
to
think
point you in the right direction. If your doctor won't do it, if your doctor won't point you in the direction of a
Yeah.
doctor that will, it
What-
should be the responsibility of whatever hospital. I mean, maybe not if it's a Catholic hospital or the government.
Well, I do like the idea of
Have a
having
list
someone
of-
who's not a medical professional being able to do that, like maybe a social worker or something,
Yeah.
be able to kind of initiate a
what I mean.
referral, you know, so that it's not so up to the doctors or the medical staff,
Yeah, I guess that's
you know, like to make that more accessible. I feel like that could be looked into a little bit more in a way that's not like, no, you just have to refer people, you know.
yeah, having it outside of the medical community
Yeah.
entirely, where somebody can look that up and look, and those resources probably out
Well,
there
yeah,
to a
people
certain
do
degree.
it, but-
So, yeah,
And
I
I'm
guess
sure there's
that's
like
true.
there's like talk as well, you know, like through the grapevine, people are learning which doctors are doing what and
I heard it through the grapevine.
something assisted suicide. Anyway,
I'm gonna get some assisted suicide. Dun, 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 dun. This is a real musical episode.
oh, it
yeah.
sure is.
Anyway, where were we? Do you have any more?
I am good. I got
more,
the end of that list.
Yeah, I think we really covered the
Dissenters.
opposition there.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about some human beings now.
Yeah.
What do they have to do with this?
Yeah, right.
God damn.
So did you guys all read the article on Rob Rollins?
Yes,
I don't remember, honestly.
I had a little steamy. I was reading it.
I was just like, I just kind of was like, oh, I'm crying right now. Like it was so quick.
Well, let's get into it.
What I like about this article is it's just so human and matter of fact.
It has a lot of good facts too.
Well, it's just
I didn't read this one.
it's kind of like it's a recount of this man, Rob Rollins. It's an account of kind of his last day and what he did and how hard he fought to get his medical assisted death.
maybe.
But then after his long battle with getting the right to die, what a normal day it was for everyone around him.
Yeah.
And it was just
Yeah.
it was really beautiful.
So should this be what we kind of end on? Like we've done like the
Yeah, we could end on this. We
Like
could
the
end on- there's
technical
probably
I feel
kind of
bad that we
broad.
haven't talked about some of these people in the timeline that are amazing. Like,
yeah. There's so much.
Well, let's at least get to Rob, and then we can at least give a little bit of the spark notes
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
other members.
Sounds good. I mean, if you read the timeline and you look into everyone whose name's on the timeline, you're going to have a really good basis in some of the names. But
Yeah, I think it's important to get a real story.
so the article that we're referring to is again CBC, which has been an amazing resource for assisted dying. They've
Bunch
been
of liberal
following
cucks.
it. I know, right? They've been following it really heavy since the beginning, and they have a lot of really
Yeah, there's a lot of great coverage.
yeah, it's great.
Soy boy beta cucks.
No, I hate it.
Yeah.
1,300 Canadians have died with medical assistance since legislation. Here's one man's story. So that's the article.
That's the headline of the article.
Yeah, headline of the article.
So it's also important for the timeline that this article was published April 20th, 2017. So it's a couple years old, but this is around the time.
But still very recent.
Yeah, it's still very recent, and it's around the time that this legislation was new.
Yeah.
Ish. So
Within the year,
that's
yeah.
important.
All right, Jasmine, make
it
me
was-
cry.
Well, it's the video of his husband, John McTavish. They were married for 29 years. Or they were together for 29 years and they got married in 2011, but, they were together. And it just kind of talks about, like, the last day, him explaining to his husband how to use the dishwasher and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like tidying up his desk and making sure his husband knows all his passwords so he can get into his browser history. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just like really human
the,
stuff
like,
that
little
he did
things that you gotta
on his
cover.
last day.
Yeah.
Do you want to breeze through it, Jasmine, or I can?
Go ahead.
I'll probably cry less.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I've
Maybe
already
not.
had a cry on this, so maybe it's out of my system.
So I'll just skim through it from the top. On Friday, January 6th, Rob Rollin and his husband, John McTavish, woke up just as they would any other morning. John got his brother, Bobby McTavish, who is unable to speak or walk, ready to go to his day program. I think his brother has ALS.
Yeah, it does
that-
go into a little bit more, and I'd like to talk about that with the disability tie as well.
So he got his brother, Bobby McTavish, ready to go to his day program. But this time, before he left, Bobby spent about an hour with Rob Rollins in his bedroom. The two were just starting to say goodbye. One of the couple's closest friends, Claire Cowley, soon arrived, sat in the living room with Rob and McTavish,
And John, yeah.
John. The three of them were chatting like it was any other morning, McTavish says, which was weird because I kept looking at the clock, knowing that, the doctor was going to drive in that driveway. The doctor arrived, and Rollins, who was 56, wanted to make sure that some practical things were in order. He tidied up his desk and made sure that McTavish knew all the passwords, and he made sure that he knew how to run the dishwasher. And then a nurse arrived from the rural village. They live in Delta, which is outside of Kingston, Ontario. And this nurse had cared for Rollins, who had battled with throat cancer and neck cancer. The nurse inserted an IV tube into his arm, and his family doctor also came, although he wasn't required to, and the group just kind of kept chatting.
This is at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
It says, right? So in the morning, I guess.
Yeah, early in the morning. McTavish says that when the local doctor who would do the final procedure arrived at the house, he talked to Rob to make sure that Rob knew what was happening and was still agreeable. So that's that secondary consent
Yeah.
that is required. You need to give consent during the act as well.
Yeah, and the nurse could have done that.
Yeah.
It sounds like the
Not
doctor was just
required,
being
but just being a
friend.
good dude.
We didn't bring this up either, but there's a forced 10 days or something in between, right? When you first
Yeah.
have the
Depends on
consultation
the
that you
country,
have
but
to.
there's
I think
usually-
Canada was 10
10
days.
day waiting period.
Yeah. The couple walked down the hallway in their small house, and Rollins smoked a cigarette, which is
Hence
You
the
do you, man.
cancer.
fitting and ironic.
Yeah.
Last cigarette.
I mean, you're gonna.
McTavish held his hand, and they came back into the living room. He said goodbye to Claire, who's his best friend, and the doctor and nurse. McTavish remembers, we went into the bedroom, he got into bed, covered him with his quilt, and I laid down beside him. The doctor came in and asked if there's anything we needed to say to each other. I'm sure they said some pretty amazing things. Then he administered the lethal dose of medication through Rollins' IV tube. And McTavish, in quotes, just says, I told him I loved him, and that it was all over in about 5 minutes, very peacefully.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful kind of last morning to spend with your
Yeah.
longtime lover and husband.
Yeah. And it does go on to say some more stats and details. It says that he made the decision to die after fighting for more than a year to live.
Yeah.
So he got to a point where he had done tons of radiation and he had an upswing and then it went down and then his cancer continued to grow anyway. And then he had to make a decision if he was going to undergo a throat dissection to remove just as many tumors as they could. And at the point he wanted to live, so he wanted to try everything. Which I think is important. You know, he wasn't just like, well, I've got cancer, I'm throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
He underwent like extensive treatment. He had the surgery. He couldn't eat. He was relying on a feeding tube in his abdomen. He couldn't barely talk, couldn't swallow really. And the doctors did at that time tell him that there wasn't anything else they could do. And he had about 6 months.
His death was reasonably foreseeable.
Yes. You know, but he didn't come by it quickly. You know, it wasn't.
No, it was a long battle and a painful battle, and one that we talked about losing your dignity. You lost a certain sense of dignity for sure.
Yeah, he was in pain.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that all sounds a lot nicer to me than slowly deteriorating in a hospital bed.
Yeah,
yeah.
he had a good go of it. He tried.
Yeah, like,
Throat cancer is a bitch.
and it got to that point where I was like, listen, there's not really anything we can do. It's only going to
Yeah.
get worse. And so he
Yeah.
chose to go out on his terms.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was, they made sure of that second consent.
There was another part I wanted to mention about this. We kind of talked about John's brother.
Oh, Bobby McTavish.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was a full and still is, I presume, a full-time caregiver for his brother, who has a brain disorder and cerebral palsy.
Okay, not ALS.
No.
Yeah.
But so his 2 cents, or John's 2 cents, are just he rejects the notion that the availability of a medically assisted dying devalues the life of people with disabilities. And I think that's important to know, that there is a bit of an overlap here with those conversations, you know, because it's like, okay, he's dropping his brother off in a day program,
Yeah.
and then he's going to say goodbye to his husband, you know, and those don't intersect, you know, like those are completely separate.
It doesn't devalue his
No.
his ethics to have his husband to choose medically assisted dying.
Yeah, and having that conversation about that video and things like that, and about the dealing with people with disabilities and stuff like that, and to have this example of somebody that's had a foot in both worlds, right?
Yeah,
And
living
like,
both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful, inspiring story.
Yeah, he says, John, about his brother, he says, I fight every day to make sure he gets everything that he should have in his life. My brother has a great life. He's on the go Monday to Thursday. He's spoiled rotten. He has everything he wants. And then just about his husband, he says that he takes comfort and relief, and he gets happiness in that Roland's had in his last 3 days, because he had some control over he would die. You know, like, you know, that gave them so much relief, right? To just know.
I would assume it'd be empowering in a certain way too.
Yeah, we
feeling
talked about this last episode.
so out of control.
Having
Yeah.
the tool there
And he said it was
gives you
the
control
way
over
he
your own
wanted
destiny.
in our home and together. And I think that is really important, that as much as we're getting we're talking about the details, we're talking about the opposition, we're talking about the letter of the law, that when we're advocating for this and we're fighting for this, this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for people to have quiet, pain-free last moments in their homes with the people they love.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Get yourself that medically assisted death, bro.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
If you want it.
Yeah, sorry, that's illegal for
If
me to
desired.
actually recommend that.
Yeah, exactly.
I take that back.
You're not a doctor. You can do whatever you want.
No, it's illegal for any person in Canada to aid, abet, or persuade someone to commit suicide.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very different. That's like that. I mean, that's in the States, but that teenager that she was texting back and
Oh,
forth
yeah.
with her boyfriend, and she convinced him to kill herself. She just got sentenced, I think, to I don't remember how many years, but she got.
Yeah,
I thought it was
it's
like a couple years, yeah.
100% not something you can do.
No, of course not.
Nor should
In
you.
most countries, I would assume.
Have you ever? I heard those messages that they're fucked.
Awful.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
She's a terrible person.
Yeah.
Just go to jail.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So different than what we're talking about here.
Oh,
Yeah, they're very,
Yeah.
very different.
And I should note the article that we've been referencing so heavily was written by Nicole Ireland.
Yeah.
Who, just killed it. It's a great article.
Yeah.
Everyone should read it.
Maybe
killed
cry.
it. Sorry.
Maybe cry a couple times.
Killed it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I heard that
Oops.
after I said it.
Oopsies.
Ooh.
But anyway, I think that's probably as good a place as any to end it.
Yeah. Is there anything else pressing that I feel like
don't
one
think
last thing.
so.
We got to get in there. We're all real tired.
Let's
think we
let's leave
really
it on the
focused in on this one.
human side of things. I think that's a good place to leave it in the
Yeah.
in the hands of the
agree.
people it affects, and maybe just plug our social media.
Yeah. Follow us
Just
on
with us.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Death Pod. The email is deathpod@gmail.com. Full disclosure, we are banking a little bit of these, so if you have sent in questions and things like that, and are like, well, why didn't they get to them on episode 2?
Yeah.
We will be getting to them. We will be having a conversation with you
Mm-hmm.
guys. Please send things in.
Probably
questions.
not until episode 4 or 5.
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Bear with us.
We're in a vacuum right now where we're pumping out a bunch of content.
Yeah,
and then we'll start releasing it. But right now we're just kind of doing stuff in a vacuum. So anything that you're saying to us the last 2 weeks, we're 3 weeks behind.
Yeah,
now. So
our priority here is to make sure that we're coming out every 2 weeks. That you will know that the show is coming. You can listen to it to make sure that we're on a regular schedule. We want to.
Yeah, but we hear you. We care. We're not ignoring you.
We're actually stockpiling content for ourselves so we can take breaks every now and again.
Yeah, because
It's not about you guys. It's about us.
Yeah.
Summer's coming.
and it's a little tiring talking about like assisted suicide and things like that. It's a little heavy. It's a little heavy.
But yeah. Do we know what we're going to talk about next episode? Not yet.
No, that's going to be a surprise for us
Kinda-
and you guys.
We dumped most of our research
This is
into these 2 episodes.
Yeah,
so we
this has
didn't
been a
really even
focus.
think-
Yeah, we're gonna really phone it in for the next couple episodes. Coast.
We're really good at coast. It's
Yeah.
gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice for you guys too.
There's going to be a lot of like just
Yeah, don't give up.
dead space where we're not really even talking that much. It'll just
Yeah.
be just white
Just
noise.
sitting there.
We're gonna record outside. You're gonna hear sirens and birds. It's gonna be real nice. We're gonna get our tan on, and
Oh yeah.
it's gonna be so sweet. Anyway,
Thanks for listening, and remember, we're all gonna die.
we're all gonna die. Bye, guys. Thank
See
you.
ya. Good job.
That was good, guys.
All right.